everybody, and welcome into a video today where we're going to be taking a look at one of the first builds I ever did when I upgraded to Studio from LEGO Digital Designer. Now this Studio build is almost 5 years old from when Studio first came out, and I think it's showing its age just a little bit. So what we're going to do today is we're going to fix it up and turn it into a brand new spanking 2021 model, or should I say 2022? Oh geez, that's almost here now. So the first thing I actually did was I got rid of all the color errors, and that was really easy thanks to Studio's new color validator feature. But now that I've done that, we're going to start a small time lapse, and I'm going to walk you through the other changes, and then I will show you this model that you've never seen before, nice and detailed and up close. So, making a start on the model, the first thing I wanted to do was get rid of these unsightly things. So the first thing I did was make a really simple change, which was why was I using those angle pieces when I could just add plates and more transparent bumpers? There was no need for that curve to be there, so it sort of made sense just to make those changes and secure the bottom a bit more, just using this logic that I have added since I grew up a bit. But and now we're on the roof. We're going to be adding a lot more details to this model today. It really lacked the detail, at least in my opinion, or at least by my normal standards. So we're going to add some crates to the top. We've already got some life rings and some bottles up here. We're going to add some life vests, and you're going to watch me do some studio positioning tool, which is actually a somewhat difficult thing to do, or at least to master the first time, but you get used to it. Just watch me use the fine positioning controls here to lay this life jacket on the boat, and then I'll do this with this other one as well. And now that we've done that, I'm going to look for a couple more special things that we want to include on the roof of this boat. So for those of you who don't know, a narrowboat is something that goes down British canals. They may or may not be in other countries. I have not done my research. However, I spent a bit of time on a narrowboat, and I remember a lot of that time. And from that, I remember a lot of the tools or a lot of the little things that were just hanging around on the boat. And in particular, it's going to be stuff that I talk about when we go and take a look at the model in depth in just a moment. But obviously, to keep an narrowboat working, you're going to need tools. You're going to need lock gate tools. You're going to need bags to keep rubbish and food in, some nets to deal with seaweed, oil cans for there's an engine in these boats, tapers to tie stuff to. And I'm saying all the wrong words, but I sort of like it. I think it works. So I'm just sort of choosing eclectically, almost mechanical bits and such, but it works and I like it. So there you go, there's a bag on the roof, there's a jerry can, a fishing net and a winch, and they're all nicely filling out the top, and it just adds that little spark of colour to make this more of a minifigure scale build. So over here we have this door hatch, and it's never been particularly interesting, but on the other side is what is definitely interesting, and that is the toilet. So we're going to use a newer piece, which is a 2x2 with only 2 studs tile / modified plate, making that a smoother exit for our poop chute, which is what I'm building now. And we're going to fine position the little studs into position, and they're going to be our poop, which comes down from the toilet on the inside, which you'll see here later in this time lapse, and obviously in the build later on. So then out to the front, a couple more details. We're going to add some mugs and some coffee cups because this is a seating area out the front. You don't use the front of the narrowboat for any steering or anything. It is mostly just for sitting or watching out where you're going. You can see everything over the top of the boat at the back. Next up though is I wanted to get these panels to be groups, the same for the roof. I want the roof to be considered its own separate unit because it is removable to access the somewhat sparse interior. We'll do the same for the panels just to make it easier to move them in and out of the way, which is something I always do in Studio just to get better access to things. I always use those submodels. And the one on the other side is big because there is no door, and this is actually based off the boat that I was on, so it's a very similar layout. And this is the kitchen area. So first things up for the kitchen area is we're just going to give it a quick little tidy up, add a couple more things like some teacups and a kettle. That's a genie lamp, so this would be an actual kettle. And there, actually next to it is supposed to represent an ice cream box, this old, very old style of ice cream box in the 70s. We're then going to add a couple of seats to the cushions so that people can actually sit on it before adding something special to the rack over here. Now, I remember being an actual fold-out table up in the wall here, so I thought it'd be really cool if we could have that here. So we have a table that is up and then can fold down, and we'll put a little chair next to it as well so that someone can sit and eat at it, because obviously there would be a table on the other side for those other seats, but I thought it would be a bit tight to include it, so I didn't do that here. So just on 2 brown studs, we're going to add another red cushion just next to this table. And one last adjustment I thought I could make before this table is done is adding connecting a TV screen to the other side. Now, while that's not particularly safe for your legs, it does give it a dual purpose. You've got a TV on one side and then flip it down and it's a table. Maybe not the safest, but I kind of like that as a touch. Of course, we're going to add the inaugural spoon by the oven and then place these two panels back inside once we correct the collision errors and move on to the bedroom. Now, this is my first studio build, and it's definitely one of the ones that I still desperately want to own in real life. And that's it really. I just want to own it. I think it looks really cool. It's minifigure scale. I'd really like my minifigures to have such a thing, and especially now that I've corrected all of the color errors, such as the 1x3 green bricks that I had, dark green bricks that I had to get rid of, as well as the strange use of brown instead of reddish brown in this model. As I said, Studio was brand new and I was a bit illiterate at that point, so we fixed all of that stuff. And then we're just going to be decorating up these cabin beds. So if it wasn't clear, these are bunk beds that obviously have to slope inwards because of the shape of the narrowboat. And we're adding a load of things like the mobile phone print, some newspapers, the Moby Brick book, as well as a lantern, which I thought were all nice, cute details. I think we need to add some toys as well, so we go for a micro figure because I think the teddy bear will be too big. And this will sort of finish out the decoration of these sort of rooms. So you've got papers to write on, a phone to use even though you're not supposed to, a book, and then a lantern as well. We've just got to work out where we're going to position these guys. Just nicely on there, I think works perfectly, and then the lantern up the top. Before we move on to this, I never quite understood this area actually. It was sort of like a viewing area, but then there were also a toilet. Just going to double check if the toilet is working okay in this very small space. If I need to make any changes, you know, we've got to check everything that we're doing. I suppose I could have replaced that floor plate with a 1x5, but I think we'll just settle for adding some toilet roll. That's going to be way too long for the doors, so I think we'll have to make our own smaller version. Maybe this is actually a toilet flusher, I don't really know. It just sort of adds a bit of extra detail and sort of looks just about right for a toilet. But as I was saying, those windows, they didn't really make sense. It was sort of like a window seat that opened out onto a river, so I don't know if it was supposed to be to like push things between boats or something. I don't really know. Either way, moving on, we have the other two beds at the stern. So this is for the driver of the boat and then just anyone else. There are two here facing either direction. And to be honest, I filmed this about a week ago and I genuinely don't remember what that transparent clear stud is supposed to be on the bottom of the bed. I don't know why I put it there or what it's doing there. It just is there and it's wrong. And there's a trash bag. I remember there being a lot of trash on the narrowboat just because you had to keep it all until you found a safe space to dispose of it. You've also got the stun, but we'll go take a look at that in the real time lapse, in not the time lapse, in the where I go show you the model. But we're just going to add a couple of finishing details. The first of which being adding these newspapers to the boat, just to add a couple more like magazines and pamphlets and details and stuff to the interior. And then actually, I think I'm going to expand the kitchen. It felt a bit small on that side, so let's add another shelving unit. And then we can put something else on the top, and I wonder what I will put there. Yes, we're going to go for the milk and juice canisters, which I just picked up in that bricklink haul. Just a nice colourful addition to make it feel more like a kitchen. And as I mentioned, a lot of these bricks would have prints on them, which is why they look a bit plain, but I would not add prints to a build like this. Let's go and check it out in real life. So, all finished up, we have the model here, and we're actually going to start at the stern today, just to show you those details that I didn't quite show in the time-lapse because they weren't quite relevant. So here we have our big steering pole, and you would have a minifigure standing just here with their arm on the pole, and just like in the boat, you can actually turn this, and it will sort of turn this little rudder piece at the bottom. It is just a loose setup that allows you to turn it, like there's only a one plate gap there for a reason, and it just sort of turns it like a rudder so that you would turn the boat. We've got one of those Ninjago tassels on the end and some very basic shaping. I remember there being quite a lot of space to stand about 3 people up here, so I sort of oversized it in the favour of a look of trying to get it to make somewhat sense and just sort of fit around in here. Then there was this small pair of doors which took us down below. So if I hide these, you can get this look down into the world below where we have a lot of our details and stuff. So that's really interesting, and we're going to go take a look in there in a minute. But before we go down, you can get this nice profile look of the whole boat if I angle it upright, and you can see it's actually pretty long, but I think it is still minifigure scale. I mean, it would take a long space to fit something like this in a city. I really like the way it looks, especially using these angled snot segments to build up the walls. Along the top, I've mentioned most of the stuff. We also had some binoculars up here, some bottles, a sextant to like or see where you're going or plot horizon. It's a bit extreme for a narrow boat, but I think it's still a nice detail. And then further along the roof, we're just using these railing pieces to compartmentalize everything, and you've got everything that a boat would need. Looking down from the top, because it's completely removable, you can see that there's actually passage for a minifigure all the way through. This was done deliberately, and beside that you can also see that I use the big door piece to scale the model, as well as to provide those entrances between the segments. And you can see we've got our living quarters, our sleeping quarters, our back room, and our toilet segment, just how it was when I went on that boat back in the day. But what I'm going to do now for us is I'm going to hide all these side panels, and we're going to go through it and I'll explain any little details that I didn't mention earlier. So, continuing our tour down from the back, you can see we still have this double-bedded section. We've also got these little cubby holes here, which can be used to store personal belongings for whoever's sleeping on these beds. Now, I'm not entirely sure if a minifigure would fit on here without the sides crushing them, but hey, we'll work it out. You've got some steps downwards from here, which I think works nicely, and that comes down into this room where you immediately got some rubbish blocking the floor. If we come over here, you can see once again this transparent tile that I'm still not sure why I added. Maybe it was an accident. I don't remember what it's supposed to be. However, if I remember at any point, I'm sure I'll bring it up. And that's pretty much all for this back room. I never really spent much time in here, so I don't remember what it was like, but it was definitely the entrance to the boat and where we stored all the food and such. Then into our next section, you can see clearly from here we have the toilet, and if you didn't quite understand earlier, there you come through the doors, you sit on the loo here, and then you can drop brown studs through the toilet, come out down below, and that's how toilets on the boat actually work. Obviously, not in the modern day because you're not allowed to pollute the rivers, but I thought it was just interesting to point out that I included it as a feature, and I enjoy that as a little like reference and nod. Over the other side, it's sort of hard to see, but it's sort of like a window seat. I mentioned this in the time lapse. You could sort of pass things to other boats through there, which I think is really, really neat. And then you come into the bunk bed section, which I do remember very well. So there are 4 beds, one on the bottom, 2 on the bottom, and 2 on the top. The bottom ones are slightly wider, so that a figure can still fit on there when the slope of the wall goes up, because obviously if you stuck them on these 2 studs, they wouldn't fit. However, the top ones may not be able to work in the same way. So in lieu of not being able to see, I added a couple of details like a lantern for seeing at night because it gets dark. You've got newspapers, a book, and a smartphone, as well as a little toy there. And I think this is a really nice room. It captures the aesthetic very, very simply. And if we look down the end, it provides this really nice like portfolio look to the building. They just sort of hang over, but there's still that clear 2 studs through the middle, and those are extended on poles just like they were. There was storage underneath the bottom 2 beds, which is something I tried to replicate. Then that moves us into our last section, and first of all, we're going to take a look at the kitchen, which starts as a sort of galley kitchen. You've got these 3 sort of pseudo counter units made with this ladder piece all the way along the end. And there's 3 of those on each side. You've got like your utensils and storage for food over here. So this box of ice creams, some milk, and some orange juice, and a teapot. Over the other side, we have a pair of mugs, a frying pan waiting to be used, and then a oven and a sink tap and a spoon and a cup. Now it's very cramped in this little kitchen, so it does also overlap each other. There was no oven, if I actually remember correctly, but there's a cupboard for you. They're just some nice extra details that sort of help with the model, and none of those get in the way of the sloping, which I think is really, really nice. And then, just like it was when I was there, which I know is something I've said a lot, we back straight on from the kitchen unit to where we would sit casually and also to eat dinner. And there are a couple of studs on there now for figures to sit on. And then, as I mentioned, there's that chair over the other side with this fold-down table, which you saw in the time lapse. But then on the bottom, you have either a TV or a little poster for the wall. Speaking of posters, we have an Ordnance Survey map, another sort of magazine, and there'd be some other smaller maps and such on here in a final build. Hopefully you get to see this one in real life one day. And then that moves us out to the stern, which is my favourite part of the boat. 1, because of the shaping, and 2, because I remember this part really, really fondly. So we have these 2 raised benches where you would sit and you could store rubbish and stuff underneath them. You would sit out here and you drink your warm cup of tea, and then you'd have like ropes out the front which would tie the boat down, but you just sit anywhere along here, sort of pretend you're on the Titanic or something like that. But I really, really like the shaping and the way that that came out. So overall, for my first studio build, I probably still one of my favourites. I really don't think that there was that much to do, and it wasn't too bad of a model in the first place. But I definitely think what we've done today has improved it, and I hope you've enjoyed getting a chance to see the model. I really, really love it, and one day I want it. And that will pretty much do it for today. So I think this is something we're going to do somewhat regularly with a couple of my studio builds. Is I'm going to fix them up or redo them, remaster them somewhat, but just for non-Zelda sets. And then one of the other things I want to do is I want to bring some of my really atrocious LDD builds across the studio and upgrade them, because trust me, they are atrocious. But we'll get to it all in good time. I thought I'd put this one out here today, sort of as our last celebration of 1 year, as it was my first studio build. And thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of the Narrowboat down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.